Today, we're going to be talking about the newest Abu Garcia Veritas rod and if it holds up to all of its expectations. So let's cover it. Before I go into the features and my overall review of the rod, let's go over the specs here real quick. So the one I have in my hands, this is the VRP C70-6. So this is the 7-foot medium heavy rod. This has an extra fast action. It comes in at 8+ tip for guides. The line weight is 12 to 20 pound. Lure weight is 1/4 to 1 ounce. This is a one-piece rod, and the MSRP is coming in at around $109.99. Now, Abu Garcia had a bunch of different features on their website. The ones that stuck out to me the most were their PowerLux 100 resin system for rod blank construction, their stainless steel guides, the high-density EVA foam, and the ergonomic reel seat. Now, as for looks, this one went a little bit different. Some of their older models, the one they had, it was 2 models back, was a black and white rod. I love the design on that rod. I think that was one of the coolest Abu Garcia colorways I've ever seen. Their one after this was actually white and red. They went away with a lot of the black in there, but on this rod, they went back to the black. They went with basically a completely, like the first 1.5 feet of the rod is almost all black with white lettering. Then they switch it up and they do white rod with black lettering. So I actually really like that. I think it's a really cool little transition in the rod. I like the colorway. It looks really neat. The overall, the EVA foam on here is really comfy. It's actually half foam, and then the top of the handle is more of like a carbon fiber in there, which is pretty cool. I like the handle overall. It's much better than the previous one. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the ergonomics, / feel category of this, but I do like the look overall of this rod. I really like that black and white. There's a lot of rod companies now that are making white rods, but to come in with a black and white is kind of a cool colorway, and I like how it starts black and then goes white. I really like that design. There's something about this to me that really hits. As for versatility and function, this is pretty much just a bass rod, but the nice thing is they do have a whole bunch of different models in there. They have a 610 medium, which would be great for like overall jerkbait fishing. They've got like a 7.3 medium heavy. That would be a good kind of all-around pond hopping rod, or just if you want like a frogging rod or something like that. And they've got a couple other models in there too. I believe they got a 7-foot medium, which to me is kind of your jack of all trades bass fishing rod. You can do a little bit of everything with that. They've got a whole bunch of different sizes in there. So overall, no matter what lure you're throwing, they've got a rod to cover it. They've got a lot of choices in both spinning and bait cast as well. As for the durability and build quality, Abu Garcia has the PowerLux 100 resin system. I don't exactly know the science behind all that, but I do know that it basically helps for fracture resistance, and I can attest that these rods, whatever they're doing with that technology, is working, because these are extremely durable rods. I've had multiple throughout my years of fishing, and they have all held up really well. I've only broken one, I think, in my entire career, but it was stupid. Like, I was riding a bike, I tripped over a root, and the rod went straight jammed into the ground. So I don't blame the rod for that. But overall, these rods are extremely durable. You can feel in your hands too. You can just feel that this rod just feels very tough. So especially some of those heavier models like that 7.3 medium heavy, this would make for a great frogging rod because of how strong it is. Definitely, if you were looking for like a beat up all around just pond rod, this would be great. This is what I had as a kid, actually. I had this paired up with a Lose Speed Spool LFS. So, it's about a $200 setup all in all. That was one of my first true, like, nice bass fishing setups I ever bought, and I loved that setup. That setup was such a tank through the years. It held up to everything that I threw at it, besides tripping head over a handlebar. Now, as for the ergonomics and feel, there has been some big improvements on this rod over the years. My one big gripe on the oldest model was that they had a really weird, like the handle here was like this big like bulb, and it was pretty uncomfortable in your hands. I did like the click that it made. It made a really nice click as you, connected your reel on the rod. The new ones don't have that. They're more of just like a regular threading you know, like any other rod has. But I do like this. I like the all carbon fiber right here too. It just makes things really light. Like this piece is super light in your hands, and I feel like it balances the rod really well too. So that is another thing. This rod feels very balanced in your hands. And I'm really glad that they changed that and went back to kind of the normal style. It was cool. They tried something new, but it didn't work, and luckily they stopped themselves pretty quick before they tried doubling down on it. The other thing about the foam as well, they didn't do a ton of foam in this rod, but the foam they did do feels pretty good quality. Some of the foam does not feel very good on some of those like sub $100 rods, so I'm glad that they got a decent quality foam in there. It feels pretty good. You know, it doesn't feel super cheap. Now, as for casting and sensitivity, the rod casts fine, especially with baitcasters. With baitcasters, definitely the reel has more to do with the castability than the rod does, but the rod casts perfectly fine. It's got super small eyelets in here as well, which are really nice. As for the sensitivity on this rod, I do think there's some baitcasters in around this price range that are more sensitive. One of those being the Daiwa Tatula XTs. Those rods are definitely more sensitive than this. You can feel it when you hold the rod versus this. But I don't know if those XTs are going to be as strong as this. So depending on what you're doing, you may want to get one rod for different purposes. So like the Daiwa XT, that would be a great rod if you're needing like a finesse jigs, or like a jerkbait rod or something like that, where you need maybe just a little more feel, a little more sensitivity. But then for a rod where you're needing like a frogging, or you're throwing Senkos in the grass, or you kind of need like an all-around beat up pond rod or something like that, then I think the Veritas is the better option. So, it's all about playing to your strengths, or getting gear based on what you're using. As for price, I think that $100 to $110, price range that this rod is usually priced at, I think is a great spot for these rods. I do think that they fish that for sure. I don't think they fish exceptionally, more expensive, than what the rod actually costs, but it gets the job done, and you're getting your money's worth out of this rod 100%. I think this would pair up great with like a Shimano SLX, or like an Abu Garcia Revo X, or even like a Luz Speed Spool, somewhere, like those like $100 reels. If you were to match this up with it, you would have a great $200 setup for someone that's like trying to get kind of like an intro bait cast rod and reel. They don't want to go too expensive, but they also don't want to have like crap gear. That would be a phenomenal little setup, and this rod would be a huge part of that combo and a huge part of getting your money's worth. Let's go over the pros and cons real quick of this rod. As for the pros, the durability, this rod is extremely durable. They're just tanks. They're tanks. In terms of feel, the rod feels great in your hands. I love the carbon fiber. I love the higher quality foam, the upgrades to the reel seat. I love everything about that. The colorway on this is also really cool. I love that black on white contrast. I think it's a really neat, really neat setup. And the price, I think it's priced great. I think you're getting, a great bang for your buck. You're getting a really solid rod for that $100 price point range in there. As for cons, I just don't think it is as sensitive as a few other rods in this price range. The biggest one is going to be that Daiwa X, the Tatula XT. That rod is probably going to be the most sensitive rod for that $100 category. So depending on what you need, you may want to go with a different rod. I am giving this an 8.5 out of 10 in terms of rating. I think overall, this is a freaking amazing rod. I think you're going to get, you're going to catch a ton of fish with this. This is going to be a just beat up tank workhorse rod that you can do a lot of different techniques with, and you can catch a lot of fish in really nasty situations with this. If you're fishing like thick ponds and stuff, for you Florida guys, some of you Californian guys, you Texans, like there's a lot of situations where this rod would really come into play. Not that you can't use it in Minnesota or Idaho, but there's definitely situations where this rod excels, and some of that heavy cover type of stuff is really one of those situations. And I know I'm griping here a lot about the sensitivity. It's really not that bad. Like for a $100 rod, it's still very sensitive. It's still much more sensitive than, a lot of other rods in this category. I just have a very high standard of what I expect out of a rod. I just, as a customer, I want to get my money's worth. And so I guess I compare this to the best of the best budget bass rods. So the fact that I'm comparing this rod, that I have this rod in that category of best of the best, that should be your sign right here that I think very highly of this rod. If you guys want to get a little more information on the reel that I talked about earlier that would go great with this rod, I'll put that right here. If you guys want to see another rod similar to this, I will put that right here for you guys. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of today's episode. Hopefully you got a kick out of it, and we will see you guys next time on Humbug Videos.